do some retweets. Get that. Get that. I'm going to move this out of the way here. Make sure I'm not screen sharing all of my Twitter credentials. And move that out of the way there. All right, that looks like we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, tech fans of all sorts and shapes and sizes and preferences, welcome to another Monday morning tech chat show. I am Juan Carlos Bagnell, aka SomeGadgetGuy, the SGG of the SGGQA podcast. And the Monday Morning Tech Show is designed to go over the top news stories of the day, spend a little time with some news stories which might have fallen through the cracks, stories that I think deserve a little bit more attention, and then really to try and engage, to try and get some conversation going with the folks who can make the live stream, who can talk in the real times. Already seeing some people pop up on the live stream. The nitpicker is in the house, Mr. Demir Frank. Demir was kind enough to join me on my Creator Chat podcast, which I'm going to have a little news for you guys about what's going on with the Creator Chat. Brett Carlton also in there too. We've got a number of news stories to talk about, and I've already been fielding some comments from folks on Twitter and other social media outlets. There are a lot of things that we want to talk about, even though we're sort of in this minor little pause between phone releases. Everybody gave the iPhone like a good 2 weeks, and now we're all kind of doing the iPhone review game. And then a whole bunch of other phones are going to come out. So we're going to have a ton of announcements. I mean, not only just phones, but tech announcements in October. Just, I don't know why companies are rushing to dump everything in October. I'm not going to be able to get to it all. I'm really trying to play strategic on what I'm going to be able to review and what I'm going to be able to talk about. And it might only be 2 phones, but we'll see. I'm definitely gonna be doing something for the LG announcement. I don't know. I'm thinking maybe a Periscope. I don't know that I want to do the same thing that I did with the iPhone XS announcement, but maybe I'll live stream the LG announcement too. We'll have to see. All right, let's see. I see Brian Harkin, Fabio, Design One, Renato Laporte, Alexier, Ronald Sims, Eddie 2, Electric Boogaloo. What's up, good people? Okay. A little housekeeping as we're jumping in. Last week, I put out a video, a really cranky rant video on the Google Pixel dongle. Google refreshed their Pixel dongle, and while I am in earnest reviewing this floppy little cable, it really turned into a rant against everything that I hate about the current state of smartphone audio as companies are copying Apple. And Google's refresh on this piece of hardware was very disappointing, so I hope you'll check that video out. And then last week we also had another creator chat with the folks at Tech Syndicate. Justin and Logan from Tech Syndicate dropped by for a really solid, like a good 90-minute conversation about changing expectations, about what happens to your channel or what happens to your YouTubery when you try and alter course. So if you start building a fan base in social media or in online streaming content, and then you start changing direction, they faced some pretty substantial backlash from their audience and how they were able to cope with that. So it's an amazing conversation, some great behind the scenes on what creators go through as they try to evolve, as they try to change, and as they try to put out new stuff. And then I also joined Relate Casts. So there's a podcast called Tech Down Over. Some really fun, goofy guys that are making their own weekly tech conversation show. They definitely come from more of the perspective of like going to trade shows for audio and video. They have a lot of camera guys come up on their podcast. I mean, we talked a little bit about things like Canon's current mirrorless strategy. And I felt terrible because I joined their podcast. They introduced me and they're like, "Oh yeah, hey Juan, and I've loved your smartphone coverage. And what I love is that you infuse a lot of humor into your discussion." I'm like, "Hey, cool guys, let's talk about really heavy stuff. Let's talk about a whole bunch of depressing tech and digital health and YouTube community topics." So I felt bad after the podcast was over because they were kind enough to have me on their show. Then they started asking these questions about things that like I was just ready to vent. So I used that as my platform to be super cranky pants. So please give them a view. Relate Casts, I think, is the YouTube channel. I'll put a link in the show notes after this goes, after this video processes. But you can find them tech down over. Two funny old guys doing a tech podcast, and I loved the conversation, but yeah, that wasn't a good look. The Nitpicker, what was the show you were on last Thursday? You mentioned it on the weekly. So there's like a generational trend happening. When I first started doing YouTube videos, there was a lot of fun and a lot of hype and a lot of passionate emotional energy in picking fights with fanboys on the other side. Android versus Apple. And this is the same flavor of fight that's been going on. For me, it's been going on since I would troll the forums in PDA and tech blogs to fight Palm OS versus Windows Mobile. And then you get Mac versus PC, and now the current flavor is Android versus iOS. So I'm not going to say what podcast, it wasn't even really a podcast. I'm not going to say what live stream it was, but I'm listening to someone host an evening live stream, and it just riled up a whole bunch of the old, the most frustrating and aspects of like geek on geek violence in this kind of discussion, where you've got some people who are fans of one platform, and then because they're fans of that platform, they're going to excuse all of the problems of that platform, while then also straw manning the arguments from the other side as to why they like that platform. All caged in this sort of attitude that they're above the discussion because they've chosen the correct platform, right? So you make an assertion, and then based on that assertion, you take things for granted on your side that you would then criticize the other side for. I jumped into the live chat just saying, oh, well, I don't think that's true. Or maybe you should consider this. Or what about these factors? And as people joined the live stream, it just got more and more heated to the point where criticisms moved from criticisms of the manufacturers, the tech companies, and the ecosystems and the software, to outright direct attacks on other people in the live stream. So I thought I'd jump in there and try and be peacekeeper, but I just made everything worse. So I'm taking a little bit of a break from just jumping in the moment to other people's sort of paneled, hosted, multiple people live stream discussion shows. Like, for example, last night, I was listening to another live stream, Lover of Tech, Benjamin. I love his stuff, and I love his commentary, and I think he's just got such a cool vibe. He had someone on, they were talking about GTX 2080 and, some of the frustrations that they've had in NVIDIA in this space, and people criticizing NVIDIA, and then why AMD isn't delivering any competition in the graphics card space. And he has a wonderful breakdown. I mean, in that live stream, he knows his history between these two companies. But I just felt like, I feel like there are some things we're missing the point when it comes to unfair business practices, and how do we compensate when the market is dominated and unfairly dominated by one company exerting their market leverage. And he was like, oh, dude, you need to come on. You need to jump on. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to jump into your live stream raw just to start another fight or start another debate. I'm going to take a step back. So the long and short of it is, I don't believe it would be too difficult to find this podcast. Not this podcast. It's not a podcast. This live stream that I'm referencing. Just the reason why I'm not trying to highlight it. And for the person who was hosting the live stream, it just turned into a bad look. And the person who's hosting the live stream, they're an up-and-coming YouTuber. I think they're doing a lot of really great work. This one just got completely out of hand, and I don't think is representative of the content that he's making on the rest of his videos and the rest of his channel. The rest of his videos are so much fun that I don't want his channel to be defined by other people joining his live stream and getting real pissy with each other. So, I mean, already in the live chat, I think people are discussing the show. If you want to know what the show is, I think people have already sort of pointed to it, but I will not mention it just because I don't think anyone looked good. I don't think I came out looking good. I pride myself on being able to talk my way out of very dicey and sensitive and emotional situations. And I don't think anyone who joined the discussion looks good. And I definitely don't think the people who bounced in the middle of the discussion looked particularly good either, especially for the arguments that they were making and trying to support their arguments. I love good debate, but good debate needs to have rules and good debate needs to have structure. And that's not what this live stream had. So, last bit of housekeeping. I am 2 days into legit camera review for my iPhone XS. And then today, I'm going to be doing all of the audio samples and recording for the audio review, which is actually going to be pretty easy because I'm going to review this phone as Apple intends for you to use it just as the phone, right? So for $1,000, you should have a complete consumer experience out of the box. And I'm coming from an iPhone SE. This is my personal iPhone daily driver, not a review unit that I used to use through Pocket Now or anything like that. So the argument is, if you're into iPhones, chances are you already had a phone that had a headphone dongle. I did not. Do you know why I don't have an Apple headphone dongle and why I have to steal my wife's headphone dongle whenever I show it on camera? Is because I use the iPhone SE. So if I upgraded personally from the iPhone SE to the iPhone XS, I would not have the audio hardware to drive headphones that didn't come in the box from Apple. So that's going to be a part of the conversation for my audio review on the iPhone XS. Some early impressions on the camera. Performance is snappy. It's quick. I'm a little concerned by the current state of iPhone photo processing. From the iPhone 7 to the iPhone 8, we saw a subtle but noticeable difference in color saturation, contrast, trying to push iPhone users into the more Samsung-y world of vivid photos ready for social media. And it seems to me that we've taken another small step with the iPhone XS towards producing the juicies, as opposed to the really even-handed and consistent photo processing that I loved, that I do celebrate from previous iPhones. They weren't always the most exciting shots, but from the iPhone 4 to the iPhone 7, if you picked up one of those phones, you very quickly got a sense of what it was going to do because it had always done that. Moving to the iPhone 8, that changed a little bit, and it took me by surprise that shots that I had an expectation of what that photo was going to look like after hitting the shutter, the shots didn't quite come out that way. They came out a little bit different, a little juicier, a little more vibrant, the white balance a little warmer, things like that. And so that's going to be a major part of the discussion for the iPhone XS camera review. And then also, I've been scouring through all of my low light samples. Unfortunately, and folks, this is maybe the most upsetting piece of news I've ever had to deliver on this podcast. For my iPhone XS camera review, I don't think it's gonna have a photo of the creepy tunnel. I know. A Southern California landmark that has been featured in my camera reviews since 2013, I think is the first time I showed off the creepy tunnel. Back before they had the really super bright white lights, it was lit by a yellow wash street lamp, one of the older style California street lamps. Currently, someone is living in the creepy tunnel, and this individual seems very angry. So to roll up on his home at midnight just doesn't feel like a good idea to me. Elias 2, unsubscribed. I'm going to try. What I might do is see if I can roll up on the creepy tunnel at like 3 a.m. or something crazy. It's driving me nuts because I love the creepy tunnel for showing off lens flare. It's such a high contrast, dynamic shot with car tail lights streaking in the background to show off the longer exposure, and you get a really great sense of what the camera lens is gonna do with a hard spot of light once you focus for the tunnel, and you can kind of get a sense of the color dynamics and the dynamic range. So I'm hoping I can get there before I have to put the review together, but I don't know if I'll be able to make it happen. I'm gonna walk through the creepy tunnel during the daytime, see if he's there, and I might say like, hey, yeah, I'm shooting a short film. I really just want to get an opening shot of this at night, and then see if he like starts getting weird about it. But the one time I walked by during the daytime while he was there, he looked legit like scary, creepy, crazy eye. So I don't know how much I'm gonna go and interact with this individual. But I don't want to be that guy, the like, I live in a home with a roof and walls and I eat food and I pay for it, and then be that guy who calls the cops on this individual. I don't want to do that. So yeah. So from MBK98, I come in peace. Elias too, I think you should give him some hot dogs. Oh, I feel bad. I mean, again, this is my liberal guilt manifesting itself in affecting one of my absolute favorite consistent shots from all of my camera reviews. So let's jump into some news. Like last week, I think I did pretty good getting through news and then not having it be like a 2.5-hour podcast just because of the news. And our first story up, talking about cameras and camera tech, I definitely want to get your, so put your thinking caps on, put your listening caps on, because this is a story that people have been pointing to in sort of a negative tone, but I think the resolution is really, really super positive. So, Red delays the Hydrogen 1 titanium phone and offers buyers a free aluminum one. This is coming by way of CNET from the first paragraphs of the article, entitled, quote, "The post I don't want to make." Red Digital Cinema founder and chief executive officer Jim Gennard admits in a Red forum posting that the first run of TI, the titanium phones, was a disaster. TI is the nickname of the titanium version of the Red Hydrogen 1 phone, priced at $1,595. Against the aluminum model, which is priced at $1,295. The Red phone is hotly anticipated for its top-notch cinema quality camera and holographic 3D display. That's CNET's words. Then CNET goes on to explain that many movies have been shot using Red cameras, but this is Red's first smartphone. I'm going to abbreviate part of this article. Essentially, let me get out of this. CNET is gilding this lily a little too much. Basically, Red has been delaying this phone. Pre-orders went up, what? Was it the end of 2016? Has it really been that long that we've been talking about the Red Hydrogen 1? Some kind of modular system, because Red does that with their cameras, 3D holographic display stuff, crazy large Lumia-style camera module on the back. It's kind of a mix between like the old Lumia camera modules and the Motorola camera module. Big smiley face circle. So the flash kind of looks like buck teeth, and then the camera lenses look like eyes. I've not been super hyped on Red entering this space. I'm hoping for an amazing specialist device. But Red jumped into the digital camera scene at a time when cinema digital camera tech was practically non-existent, and they created an entirely new language. They were at the forefront. Red jumping into the phone space seems like bad timing IMO, where the smartphone market has become so heavily commoditized, and we've all kind of agreed on what a smartphone should be and should do, that now that they're getting into this space, I'm not sure exactly what kind of conversation they're hoping to have outside of, we can make a phone for professionals, but I'm not sure who that really is yet. Not until this phone is really out. That being said, it's really flipping refreshing to have someone, Jim Gennard, being so vocal and public and upfront about how hard it is to make a phone. the number of times he said, like, we really don't know what we're doing is, again, this is refreshing. So that the titanium run of this phone, the more expensive version of this phone, has not been going well, I think this is actually a really solid response to the market. Apparently, the aluminum version of this phone is being manufactured well, and so if you had pre-ordered the titanium version, when the aluminum version ships, they're just going to send you one of the aluminum versions, and then when they figure out their problems with the manufacturing process for the titanium version, they'll send you one of those too, and you can just keep the old aluminum version that you've had. I think that's a pretty legit way to solve this problem, provided they are actually fixing the manufacturing on the titanium version of the phone. So, I don't know. So many people have been criticizing and commenting, and like, I definitely join the conversation with Red doesn't know what they're doing, so I don't know that I would trust a first generation product from a company that's never made a phone before. But if you were in line and you wanted to be a part of that Red ecosystem, to me this seems like the best possible outcome for a company having problems. Instead of just delaying and staying quiet or trying to obfuscate or trying to redirect or misdirect, they just came out and said, here's the problem, here's what we're going to do to fix it, and I think it's a reasonable solution. Ganzi Tech Nerd, one would wait for the Red Hydrogen if it could change the brains of the phone like it can do with the Red Cine cameras, which won't happen, so that is a deal breaker. That is a concern. How long is the life expectancy of a smartphone versus what is Red's argument for entering the smartphone space? Is this a device that's going to last multiple years? Are we going to get 2 years of software support? One of the things that I think harms the idea, not necessarily the execution, but the idea of modular phones and modular systems is this an ecosystem I'm investing in that's going to last for a while? If I buy Canon lenses, I'm pretty confident I'm going to be able to use them for a really long time. If I'm going to have to flip my $1,600 phone every year or every other year, that doesn't quite feel like a robust system that I'm investing in. Even if they're making all these parts and pieces and modular bits and add-ons that can live with future versions of the phone, we all have this tech fear that this stuff cycles faster than it probably needs to, and that spending money on it doesn't necessarily deliver the full bang for buck that we're hoping it will. So I don't know. It to me is that's the concerning aspect of Red. But this, at least for people who are putting their money in, putting $1,600 into a phone, to me seems like a reasonable solution. From Dave B09, it's probably going to ship with an 835 when the 855 comes out. Again, I don't know. I mean, one of the reasons why they've been holding off might be because they're getting trapped by the upgrade cycle. If Red delivers a phone at the end of 2018 with a Qualcomm 835 for $1,600, we better see some amazing performance in other aspects of the phone. So much of this is unknown until this phone is actually for reals and in someone's hand who can do some proper deep dives, who isn't just gonna like overview it, read the specs off the side of the box, and then show us like 3 low light photos from their front porch. I mean, what I want to see is this phone in the hands of DP Review. That's the kind of examination that I want from the hardware that we should be caring about on this device. So we'll have to see. Speaking of phones and phones in hands and support, how we support our products, I was kind of surprised that this got the little minor bump of news coverage that it did, but I guess I'm happy that people are talking about the longevity of our gadgets. Google is launching a mail-in repair service for Pixel phones. So for the Pixel XL, the Pixel 2, and the Pixel 2 XL, if you are out of warranty, or if you've damaged your phone in some way that isn't covered by your warranty, like water damage, then there is a new service that's opening up on, and where Google is also trying to help people find local repair shops. But if you're in the United States, Google now has a direct repair mail-in service. You take your Pixel, they send you a label, you slap it in a box, ship it out to them. 10 business days goes by, they tell you whether or not they can fix it, and then you hopefully get a repaired Google Pixel. We've been having so many conversations about things like software support and right to repair and other consumer-friendly business practices versus consumer-hostile business practices. I'm ultimately positive on this, but I want to know what Google's relationship with third-party repair centers is going to be like. If Google starts trying to, how do I want to phrase this? It's not like they're going to dominate the market on Pixel repairs. You know, all million people that own a Pixel. It's more than that, but you know what I mean. Are they still going to be supporting shipping parts, making sure that other outlets can repair Pixels, or will this eventually replace any kind of third-party repair setup? You know, a la Apple. This is one of those things where, on the one hand, I'm super positive that Google is looking at how Pixel owners can maintain their original smartphone purchase for longer periods of time instead of these things just getting recycled and, you know, a significant amount of material is lost because it, you know, might not be completely recyclable. I don't know how recyclable the Pixel and the Pixel 2 are, but will this eventually be the service which motivates Google to eclipse the relationship or to cut the relationship with mom and pop brick and mortar smartphone repair services? Apple has in my opinion, has a pretty shocking, a pretty appalling relationship with customers and with repair sites, repair shops in getting Apple products fixed. So much so that they will even block authorized Apple parts from entering the country under the auspices of protecting the consumer from getting bootleg parts. But you can even take two legit iPhones, real iPhones, take the screen out of one and put it in the other, but because that phone didn't have a serial code from the second screen, it will bork. It will not be repaired properly. And sometimes, depending on the Apple update, it'll even lock up the phone to harm the consumer who tried to get their phone fixed, not at a Genius Bar. So I think it's, I don't know. I'm emotionally torn on Google's move here because I just don't know what the future holds, and I want more repairable devices, and I want easier phones to fix. So I want to see what they do here. From Ruari, I can't even buy a Pixel here in Ireland. Looking at the horrible Pixel 3 XL, I could not care less. Renato Laporte, Samsung has a 24-hour repair system with pickup and delivery here in the Netherlands, upside down smiley face. From Glorious LDR92, I sincerely hope that the out-of-warranty system doesn't supplant the accessibility of their parts. There are a couple of chains that are authorized, but there are plenty of good ones that aren't. And that's another thing too, is I kind of like a market which, so I do and I don't. I kind of like a market that looks like auto repairs, right? So when I used to drive a Saab, I would take it to the official Saab dealer and get terrible work done. And then I would take it to this crazy mom and pop run shop, hole in the wall, and they could fix anything on that car, and they were cheaper. So it's not even like, will I find some shady repair shop and then stuff's going to be borked on my phone. It's like having that as part of the competition, as a sense of the competition, just makes me feel better about an ecosystem that maybe you might run into someone kind of shady, but you actually have services and people competing for that kind of business. Also from Glorious LDR92, I'm part of a small repair company. It's been hard dealing with the newer iPhones due to a lack of access to quality parts. Very disappointing, especially for how fragile iPhones are. I think there are a lot of repairs that are going to be incoming, and I don't like that Apple can chill competition whenever they feel like it, especially after watching the teardown. It's just pants on head dumb the way that the back glass on the iPhone has been designed. So there's a reason why on an iPhone 10 Max, 10s Max, when you crack that back glass, it costs like $500 to replace the glass. It's not because you're replacing the glass, it's because major components of that phone are essentially glued to the back glass. So you can't just replace the glass. That's bad design. That's terrible design. For anyone who's trying to claim that iPhones are something special, that to me is a deliberate consumer hostile way to build a phone so that any type of interaction with service can also be a profit motivator, as opposed to building a device that's easier to repair, more timely to repair, more cost efficient for your service centers to repair. No. We're going to make some cash on you in every step of the chain. Let's see. I've got a lot of other. Ronald Collins, 2006 Saab is a Saturn in disguise. No, I drove a 1991 Saab 900S and then bolted on the turbo. So I had the larger engine displacement and a turbo on there. Absolutely flipping loved the old like steel body, cast iron block, nose heavy, torque steer, front wheel drive Saabs. Those things were beautiful. All right, let's move on. Pixel, mail-in service, ultimately, short-term, thumbs up. Concerned about the implications of where that could go. So we'll just have to wait and see. We were already talking about some iPhone-y stuff, some iPhone issues. When I put out the tweet before the show, one of the number one replies was to talk about all of the challenges and all of the problems facing the new iPhone XS and XS Max. People complaining about Blue Shift. I think one of the more concerning issues is what's being dubbed ChargeGate. Unbox Therapy plugged in a bunch of iPhones, and some of them lit up and charged, and some of them didn't. So I'm always skeptical of, like, first week, rush to find the problems kinds of commentary on smartphones. First of all, this is where Apple gets unfair credit that somehow their products are special, that somehow they're not just another technologies manufacturer. Apple, my whole commentary for Apple moving forward will be, Apple is not special. Apple could be Dell, Apple could be Lenovo, Apple could be Acer, Asus, Toshiba, any other manufacturer. They are subject to the same problems, the same defects, the same quality assurance issues. There is no magic Apple sauce. The problem with that is there's also no competition. There is no competition in the iOS space. If there's a batch of iPhones that had an issue, you can't go and buy another iOS device from another manufacturer. So you are stuck, right? You are trapped. And that is what's concerning whenever we discuss these types of Apple issues, Apple shenanigans. So it sounds, reading through some of the testing procedures that people have done with this ChargeGate situation, this sounds like a software and authorization problem, where if you go into the iPhone settings and you enable access for USB devices, that it seems to fix whatever's going on with this charging problem, though obviously that setting is disabled over security issues. So you've just made your device a little less secure, but it fixes this problem with the charging, which to me means a 0.0.1 update to iOS should be able to fix this situation. This should not be such a disastrous hardware problem that you would have to send your phone back in. From Gansey Tech Nerd, keep watching. Apple will definitely try to demolish unauthorized repair centers and try to rule over with their dominance and adamancy. From Cheryl, have to say at Wambagnell, my local tech friends bumped into the charging problem rather than looking out for it. He had to do the plug in, plug out method before it charges again. Is this a lemon? That's what I don't know yet. My experiences, I have an iPhone XS. This first seemed to manifest more aggressively on the XS Max, but now other people are saying it's happening on their smaller iPhone XSs too. I have actually not plugged my iPhone XS into the little charging brick, the little charging cube that comes with the phone. I've been using my first generation Nokia wireless charger. That's my main Qi charger. It still works fine from my Lumia days. From my early Lumia days. I'm so happy Apple finally caught up to 2010, 2000, I don't know. Basically, they're like 7 years out of date. I've used it on the wireless charger, seems to do just fine there, and I've also used it with my car charger, which isn't anything special, and it seems like it's always connected fine there. I don't know if there's any difference in how the little charging cube maybe talks to the iPhone, or if the iPhone is doing anything differently with the electricity coming into the device. I've just sort of come to accept that it's a slow charging phone, even for that smaller battery capacity. So I'll be curious to see if these concerns are abated with the next batch of bug fixes and updates for iOS. So the other issues that I think, I've been reading about, things like blue shift and blue tint on displays, I don't really think are deal breakers. I've never been super critical or anxious about color shifting when you view your phone at extremely odd angles. So I've got my phone up in front of me and I turn it and, oh no, the color shifted. I know LCDs are a little bit more resistant, or actually a lot of it now are a lot of bit more resistant to that kind of off-axis viewing. But it's exceedingly rare, the times that I'm looking at my phone at some kind of extreme angle, where I'm actually interacting with it to a degree that I would need the clarity and the accuracy of the color and not be able to handle the slightly different color shift from that. And as far as I've experienced on basically every kind of OLED panel, and I don't have an OLED TV, so I can't comment on that, but anytime you view an OLED off-axis, there is some kind of color shift. People try to say that Samsung phones don't color shift, but when I was rocking Galaxy S8s and Note 8s, it was pretty clear that Samsung's display had gone ruddier than for the Galaxy S7 era of phones. My Galaxy S7, to me, had a much more color-accurate display when you turned off all of the juicy saturation modes. And my Galaxy S8 went really ruddy. Like, it got really orangish, reddish when you would pull up whites on that display. And then, color me just a little bit spoiled, but the LCD on the LG G7 is a slightly cooler display, and I've kind of just come to take that as being a slightly more color accurate display. So when I look up my iPhone OLED and it's a little warmer, it's a little more saturated, it's a little richer, I'm not really looking at it to be some kind of professional color accurate experience. So I don't buy that color shift, blue tint. Unless you're looking dead on the phone and there was just a manufacturing issue with that panel, that's something that you go and take your phone back and get it replaced. But again, Apple's not special there. LG is one of their major component suppliers, and we know that LG can sometimes have some QA issues with their screen tech, that they're probably still about a generation and a half or 2 generations behind Samsung in that regard. That's an actual problem, but that's a one-off problem. That's like one Galaxy Note exploding in a lady's purse is just one individual problematic phone that doesn't necessarily represent a trend where now it's a deal breaker. I can never buy that phone because one person had a problem. So we want to see a consistent issue with that device. The charging issue, that is definitely a bit more concerning. So we'll have to see. From the Nitpicker, I don't think the G7 is accurate at all. Actually, quite off compared to most others. I think it's kind of difficult to say on smartphone screens because we're moving back and forth between some of the things we like, whether or not you like more saturated or contrastier displays or cooler displays. And then we also have to contend with the number of software add-ons. Apple's True Tone really does mess with a lot of the color stuff in there. And I don't think LG's screen processing and screen augmenting tech is very compelling. So I tend to disable that and go for the flattest look I can on any of their phone screens, OLED or LCD. And I think once I've taken that step to manipulate it, not what comes out of the box. What comes out of the box is always going to be way off. But when I've gone through to disable the settings that make the experience juicier, like going from the Galaxy S7 to the Galaxy S8, I disable all of that color manipulation stuff, and I think the Galaxy S7 screen is higher quality and more accurate than the Galaxy S8 screen. And I kind of had that same experience with LG, where that LCD, after you disable that junk, to me, looked better, looked more consistent. Though a touch cooler, your whites did shift a little bluer, but that's a little bluer compared to OLED screens, which are going warmer and ruddier. So it's a difficult balancing act to try and say, because I think a lot of people are also looking at this. Not that Damir is. I'm pretty sure Damir knows his way around the settings panel. But a lot of people tend to start looking at this through how the general user is going to use the device. I do have to laugh whenever I see camera comparisons, and you're like, well, I used the phone in full auto awesome HDR mode and smart HDR mode because that's how most people are gonna shoot. So that's how I'm gonna do this camera comparison. And you're like, then you're not really comparing the cameras. You're comparing software processing algorithms, and we don't even have a sense of what you tapped on to focus for the phone to make a decision on how it was going to alter the photo in post-processing. That's not a camera comparison. That's a let's look at two pretty photos of my backyard comparison and just randomly guess on what algorithm changed what saturation setting. But I digress. My experiences so far with charging haven't been bad on the iPhone XS. My experiences with the iPhone XS have been absolutely miserable for transferring data. My first night of shooting, I think I shot almost 15 gig worth of photos and videos in low light, and then some of the early morning test shots that I had. Trying to transfer that to a computer took hours. Not just because the transfer rate was slower than USB 2, but because the connection to 3 different PCs was the flakiest I've ever experienced on a phone since the days when you would go into USB host mode in Android. Or in Windows Mobile. You would plug your phone in and then it would say, do you want to transfer files or do you want to charge? And you would say transfer files. The phone would then turn into a USB flash drive, and you couldn't do anything on the phone because that connection was now locked, so that the computer could access files on the phone. It wasn't until we switched over to MTP, blah, 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 blah. I could not keep my iPhone XS connected to any one of my PCs for more than 15 minutes before it would sever the connection and destroy whatever file was in the middle of being transferred. I would then have to unplug and replug it in. This happened so many times on my laptop, on my Razer laptop, that I had to delete any knowledge of Apple devices being connected to that laptop so Windows would discover it fresh. The USB driver had just gotten so worked over disconnecting and reconnecting over and 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 over again. This didn't used to be that bad. Again, I'm coming from my daily iOS driver being an iPhone SE. It was slow. This has always been slow, but dumping the full contents of this 16 gigabyte phone would take a long time, but I could set it and forget it. On the iPhone XS, that is now completely broken for me. AirDrop is not an acceptable solution because by the time I'm all shot and done, I think I'll have generated 50 to maybe 60 gigabytes of content. Whenever I produce a camera review, I try to shoot as much as the average user might create over the course of months of owning that phone, and I generate all of that content in a matter of 3 days. That's why it takes so long for me to produce one of my camera deep dives. It's why those videos end up being 20 minutes long. There's a lot to go through. There's a lot to look at. So, some kind of iCloud solution, not acceptable. Some sort of cloud storage. I mean, like, I pay for OneDrive, but I'm not going to upload 60 gigabytes of content to OneDrive and then re-download it back to my PC. And today I'm going to run a test and see if it's any faster or any more consistent to maybe upload over Wi-Fi to my NAS rather than plugging in a cable. So to spoil part of my camera review, which will be a Patreon exclusive, the iPhone has moved from being an acceptable performer in some kind of professional endeavor to being an absolute no-go until these issues are corrected if you work in any kind of mixed environment. Mixed media environment, mixed computer environment, mixed processing environment. It's not acceptable to say, well, just need to buy a Mac. It's a phone that I've already spent $1,400 on. It should be able to handle USB. It can't do USB. What the hell? That's not okay. If I had to rely on any of that footage from my iPhone, I'm putting out a video tonight, or maybe tomorrow, maybe tonight. I don't know yet. Just talking about something stupid and silly, like how I organized my apps on the iPhone XS so it was less of a mess, less of a steaming pile of flea market poop. Whenever you install apps on the iPhone, here's how I've cleaned up my iPhone so it's a little bit easier to navigate. That video should have taken me 90 minutes to shoot, to pull a couple screen grabs, to pull a couple video, like I did screen recordings, edit it all together, get it out. Because of this bug where I couldn't transfer files for more than 10 minutes, 15 minutes at a time, that video took me an entire day to finish. If I'd ever had to rely on any footage from a phone, that would have just killed me. That would have been an absolute deal breaker. It would have been faster for me to reshoot footage from any other Android device, drive back to my home, plug in the USB cable, transfer it over, and be done with it. But I needed iPhone-specific content, and 3 different PCs could not stay connected. So it just works. Until it doesn't, and then you're proper boned because there's nothing else you can do. Let's move on. In talking about, let me drink some water because that was a little bit. From Ellis Abbey, $1,400 phones. At that price, phone gotta do all the things. From Brett Carlton, it could do USB. Apple doesn't want you to own a PC, so they make your life hell. So you buy a MacBook Pro that throttles and burns your lap. Apple has a terrible track record for any kind of open standard. It's still, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but it's still a mess getting Mac OS to properly recognize all of the standard of USB, like MTP support. I don't know, has that gotten any better? Do you still have to install dumb software to make a Mac recognize an MTP device? It's USB, universal serial bus, and even Apple has to break that. Let alone charge you $30 to $40 for a dongle just to have a full-size USB port. So, again, if you're a pro and you rely on this stuff, I cannot recommend. I have to say, that's a pretty big deal breaker. If you're just doing funsy little social media photos for yourself, great. But I've been making the argument for a while that you can rely on your phones for professional grade content creation. Apple is making a pretty good argument for why you can't. Another reason why Apple is making a pretty good argument for why you can't rely on their phones the same way that you can rely on competitors' devices is the charging situation as it pertains to fast charging. So you buy your $999 iPhone, which after taxes, and you should put Apple Care on there, and just factor in the cost of a case, so $20 to $50 there too. Again, roughly that $1,300 to $1,400 territory. You then still need to spend, another $80? Another $100? I forget what the actual pricing is. I apologize. To get a fast charger brick. To get a little brick and a new cable that can charge your phone even faster. I am going to recommend people do not buy Apple's fast charging solution. Buy some extra wireless chargers so that you can slow charge. Keep using the slow charger instead of using the fast charger. Apple's current solution makes me very nervous about the long-term health of their newest phones, the iPhone 10 from last year and the iPhone 10s, 10s Max, and the iPhone 10R. Apple's fast charging tech is not very sophisticated. It is basically just ramping up the speed of the charger in a way which causes the phone to run hot and throttle. One of the things that I'm pointing to here. Actually, give me 1 second. I'm just gonna pull up. I've got it on my on reddit.com/r/glowing rectangles. I posted. I've got it right here. Let me just cue this up. I posted this video from TechAltar. So this is a video about Oppo and OnePlus. He really likes OnePlus's strategy, but he goes through some pretty legit measurements on things like fast charging technologies, how they work. This is a great primer for understanding the differences between different types of fast charging tech. And now Super VOOC, the super fast charging mode on the newest Oppos sounds so simple, but it's such a novel approach to getting more juice into your phone even faster. And so the chart that I have up right now, please watch this whole video. Please subscribe to TechAltar. He produces such phenomenal content, and I genuinely enjoy every product that he's put out in a very calm, intelligent, well-researched style of video delivery. But what we're seeing on this chart right now, for those of you listening to this podcast, we are testing an iPhone 10, a Huawei P20 Pro, an LG G7, a Note 9, and the new Oppo VOOC fast charging. The phone charged from almost dead to completely full in 31 minutes. 31 minutes, a complete full charge. That sounds really scary. But if I fast forward, I'm spoiling so many major aspects of this video. The phone temperature peaked and then dropped rapidly. So it didn't even get to its full temperature until the phone was nearly full, which makes a ton of sense because it's that last bit of charging, that sort of 85% to 100% of charging where the battery is really being worked the hardest in finishing off that charge, and then rapidly cools back off again. But it doesn't get nearly as hot as the iPhone. There's a 5 to 7 degree difference between this phone and the iPhone stays sustained at that higher temperature, at that higher charge rate, because of how much less sophisticated Apple's fast charging tech is. The only phone that's really close to what Oppo is doing with the Super VOOC is Huawei. Huawei's supercharger tech is similar in how it handles voltage, amperage, and wattage to get power into your phone. His breakdown on what the different types of technologies do, how they're implemented, and how they work is phenomenal. It is very easily broken down to a very, very easy level, and when you see what those differences are, it makes the current conversation from Apple and Qualcomm a little bit more disappointing when we look at their fast charge tech. When we look at Qualcomm-powered devices that don't use Super VOOC, and we look at iPhones using their fast charging solution and why they run so hot when you use those fast chargers, this is a bad state of affairs for devices that have sealed up batteries. And Apple still maintains what is the bare minimum battery capacity we can put into a phone so that it runs well during the day for the first 6 months of ownership. So my battery life on my iPhone XS has been pretty good. It's not blowing my mind. It's not blowing the doors off of my battery testing, my battery performance, but it's brand new. As this battery ages, there is no buffer zone here. My LG G7 has a larger battery, manages the day actually a little bit better than what I've had in my usage, and especially with camera and audio tech heavy usages. But it's neck and neck, it's pretty close. But as my LG G7 battery degrades, there's a little bit more room there for the battery to degrade. The iPhone doesn't have that same kind of consideration. Also, there's nothing in the phone design on the iPhone XS to help it dissipate heat. If you go and watch a teardown, again, you've got electronics just bolted to the back of the back glass and batteries just kind of glued in place. The major heat generating components just sort of cook themselves in the phone. Again, I've got a delicious green chili and chicken hominy stew going in my crock pot. Kind of just build up heat in the phone case and just let it sort of, marinate your sensitive electronics in there. So I haven't run into battery charging problems, but I do fear that this is yet another generation of iPhones that won't have very good battery longevity. And once we're out of this recall period, this class action lawsuit period from Apple's battery throttling, where they would throttle the CPU because they put in smaller than they needed to batteries for their phones. For phones that should last 2, maybe 3 years? No, not really. I think we're going to be probably in the same boat in another 2 years when we're looking at the iPhone X. There's nothing about this that makes me overly confident that Apple's really fixed those problems. I think they're just going back to business as usual. From Lover of Tech, Qualcomm, Apple, and Samsung are, I think you mean behind the curve with their charging tech at the moment. SuperVOOC is a beast. From Cheryl replying to the nitpicker, it's like Qualcomm and Apple are not or do not want to learn stuff from the Chinese companies. From Fat Produce, I just wish that Huawei car external battery pack superchargers were more available in North America. Andrew at Fat Produce has a Huawei. So from Nathan Million on Periscope, the newest iPhone batteries are literally shaped like an L. Take the L, Apple. Take the L. Especially for the way that they're divided. Go watch that Tech Alter video. Please go watch that Tech Alter video. Oppo has built something that when you see what they've done, it's such an obvious move. It makes me mad that I didn't conceive of this in battery tech. And then you look at the battery structure on an iPhone, and there's no reason why Apple couldn't have done something similar, except for the fact that Apple is not a tech innovation company anymore. And the health of their phone is not their concern, because consumers will pay to fix the things that Apple broke. Ugh. Let's get off of Apple problems. We are getting into the politics block of this podcast. I'm gonna try and move through this efficiently so that we don't get too cranky pants. How do you secure your phone? Do you use a 4-digit PIN? Do you use a robust password? Do you use biometrics? What are your legal protections based on how you secure your phone? What can a court compel you to divulge or compel you to do based on how you've locked your device? This is a very concerning story to me. This is one wanting to put on some tinfoil hats. From the Next Web, many outlets have covered this, but I caught it on the Next Web. FBI uses Face ID to unlock a suspect's iPhone X for the first time. First paragraph. For the first time ever, America's Federal Bureau of Investigations had a suspect to, that's bad writing, had a suspect to unlock his iPhone X using Face ID. The agency forced Grant Michalski, an Ohio resident who is accused of receiving and possessing child pornography, forced Grant Michalski to unlock his iPhone X with his face on August 10th. The FBI had a search warrant which allowed them to make Michalski unlock the phone. After unlocking the phone, FBI Special Agent David Knight discovered conversations on chat messenger Kik about abusing minors. Michalski had previously talked to an undercover officer on the app who posed as a father interested in sex with children. He had also exchanged emails with another suspect, William Weekly, about his interest in incest and having sex with minors. This guy sounds like a terrible, terrible person. Later in the article, though, according to U.S. law, suspects can keep passcodes to themselves under the Fifth Amendment. But there is no such rule for face and fingerprint data. Since the law is unclear about whether authorities can ask anyone to unlock their phones using biometric data, courts are dealing with it on a case-to-case basis. So the warrant didn't allow Knight to ask for a passcode to access data. However, the Columbus Police Department and the Ohio Bureau of Investigation were eventually able to get access to the data through special tools. The article goes on to talk about the industry of companies that are looking at how they can crack iPhone encryption, Grayshift, Celebrite. There's going to be this escalating arms race. It's one of the reasons why Apple recently implemented that USB lock, where if you don't use your phone for a specific set period of time, it'll lock the data transfer regardless of what you can do to kind of crack into the phone. This really bothers me for many of the reasons that we've talked about on this podcast in the past. Technology improves at a rate that our legal system, our lawmakers, our judges seem unable to fully adapt to in the moment. There's a common sense argument, there's a good faith argument to be made that biometric data, your face and your thumb, should not be treated any differently than putting in a PIN or a passcode. But there's also a pretty clear legal argument that when you use your fingerprint to secure your phone, you essentially share your password with everything you touch, right? When you make the password of your phone your face, you are essentially walking around with your password visible for everyone to see. I would really love for a phone manufacturer to create a form of two-step verification where instead of biometric data being my password, biometric data is my login, is my ID, is my username, and then I have to put in a password to unlock the device. That to me would be an acceptable security affair. I mean, like, I'm looking at something like a BlackBerry, right? Corporate grade security. I would want that to be, you know, like, touch the spacebar for the phone to recognize it's me, and then now that it's you, now put in a password to open the device. Like that, if I had that kind of data security initiative foisted on me, if the information on my phone were that sensitive, I would be happy with that. But what's concerning to me is we still don't have an answer in the courts as to how this information should be handled and how a user can safeguard their phone. By using Face ID or by using a fingerprint scanner to lock your phone, the user is saying, I want to keep my data private. I want to keep my data secured. The utilization of someone's person, their fingerprint or their face in that regard, IMO, should be treated the same way as a password or PIN. It's very troublesome. It's very concerning to me that we haven't found that case, that legal case, that clearly defines an operating guideline or best practices for law enforcement and for investigators when our technology is utilized like this. It's very concerning to me that there isn't precedent to point one way or the other what we need to get a warrant for, how that warrant can be executed, and what our privacy, how our privacy should be maintained in that situation. And the fact that some courts can rule one way and other courts can rule other ways just seems like a terrible place for consumers to be operating in the unknown. That's never a good place for citizens to be operating in the gray area of what is the law, when are you running afoul of the law, and what resources do you have at your disposal to protect your information or to protect your privacy. So that's absolutely something that I'll be writing a letter to my local elected officials to say, This is worth getting involved in, and this is worth having an opinion on before another major case of this happens. From One Mezion, I have said the exact same thing a while back about the two-step verification process where biometrics and passwords are concerned. From Ganzi Tech Nerd, when a suspect's fingerprint is being taken for solving a crime, then isn't a warrant to utilize the same fingerprint to unlock a personal device that could be part of the crime investigation valid? I think I understand what you're asking. So say you're arrested for a crime and they fingerprint you. That's kind of what I mean, is identifying you versus opening your technology. This is why we need lawyers and courts to actually rule on this. Can you utilize the content of an investigation, like the fingerprint, something used to identify that individual, as your method of breaking into their private information, their private store of data? I think some courts would be willing to say yes, and other courts would be willing to say no. Some judges would say absolutely. Other judges would say it's a different situation. That's a problem. It's a problem when we don't have a consensus on that. And that's also why I point to there needs to be some sort of consumer education. Everything you touch leaves a trace of your password. This is a convenience lock. This is not the most secure lock. I have a number of friends who still do work in the government sector. They are not allowed to rely on fingerprint for locking their devices. And we're talking about phones that are so controlled by government IT departments that they can't install any apps or play any games or have any other things. Like, if you want to have a service running on your phone, it has to go through a government IT department to get approved, installed by someone else other than you, and then the phone is handed back to you. When you open that device, it is almost always a strong password situation. It is almost never a PIN, and it's definitely never biometrics. They don't trust it. They don't rely on it. It's not safe. So even with the improvements to things like depth sensing, 3D scanning, Huawei's tech is really cool, and it makes it faster, and it probably does make it more secure. Governments still don't use it because there is still the possibility that someone could find a way around that through some novel, maybe 3D printing, maybe some sort of molding tech. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. But it's never a good idea to leave your password on everything you touch. Like, say you had a 4-digit PIN, and every time you touched something, you pulled out a sticky note and you left your 4-digit PIN on what you touched. That's not, I mean, that's a ridiculous way to make this comparison, but it's not completely inaccurate. So according to Akshay, the moral of the story is keep your porn collection in some secured folder. So from K Jones, you can't just put a fingerprint on a 3D printed finger and try to unlock a phone. I mean, you can try. You might need to do something more robust, but depth sensing isn't going to be undefeatable. Again, it just depends on how badly you want to get into that phone, and someone will find a way to get into that phone. K Jones, the iPhone detects when it isn't a real finger, but how? We've used temperature sensing and we've used depth sensing. If you can warm and create ridges, then you could probably go a long way towards defeating a fingerprint sensor. I'd even be curious to see if there isn't some way of defeating Face ID through like a molding process. Like, we can just make a face print and see what we could do on you. I know some people tried to do that and had varying results, but I'm sure there are people working on that behind the scenes to do something even more nefarious. So that made me very concerned. Okay, we've got a short block. Let me get through these stories here, because I keep saying let me get through this stuff, and then I spend a long time talking about it. This is some Facebook stories here from The Independent. Facebook hack gets worse as company admits Instagram and other apps were exposed too. So just recently, you might have seen Facebook telling you you've been logged out of your account and some warnings about people who might have had access to your account under your login and credentials. It turns out 50 million people on Facebook were affected by this issue. It's mostly pinned to the Facebook login service. Now, because of the way that the Facebook login service can be utilized for other online services, that became a point of entry to Instagram and almost any other app that you can use your Facebook login as your standard login. Thankfully, I didn't seem to be affected by the initial breach, the 50 million people. I was not one of them on Facebook. And it just further reinforced why I am so happy that I have never used a service which required a Facebook login. And for any service that could use a Facebook login, I've always just gone with a traditional email address user account created. So that is a real bad look. I am not a fan of Facebook. I do not like Facebook. I think Facebook is a major contributor to much of what is broken in current society when it comes to discourse and having grown-up conversations about nuanced problems. I do not envy them the losing battle. I think ultimately Facebook loses this fight of policing content, of keeping some sort of community standards in place as they have to encounter the worst of humanity uploading photos and videos and hate speech to their platform, and then also securing that platform. Because they've created a platform that they need to monetize. The monetization process basically means it can never be completely properly secured unless they shift business models to a direct financial transaction with end users as opposed to selling off user data. They're always going to leak like a sieve. They'll never be able to plug up all of these holes. And now they are becoming synonymous with internet in a number of areas around the world. MBK98, MySpace, Friendster. Well, I mean, it's funny because I'm even trying to change my behavior. Obviously, I use Reddit quite a bit when I'm just trying to get a rundown on news stories, but I'm trying to go back to RSS feeds. I'm trying to go back to individual websites where I know I like the people who are creating content and trying to drive traffic directly back to those sources as opposed to using social media as the feed through which I consume content. And it's really hard. It's really difficult. It's difficult to find new things when you're trying not to use something like Facebook or Reddit to expose you to new content. At the same time, while all of this has been going on, fightforthefuture.org has another little concerning story here. And talking about Facebook policing content, Facebook caught automatically blocking Associated Press and Guardian stories about their massive data breach. This morning, news broke that a massive data breach has exposed the personal information of 50 million Facebook users to hackers. A company blog reports that nearly 90 million users were forced to log out of their accounts as a security precaution. Shortly after, reports began to circulate on Twitter that Facebook was blocking a Guardian story about the breach from being posted on its platform. Within minutes, additional reports began to circulate that an Associated Press story about the breach was being blocked as well. This is a major reason. This is exhibit number 10,000,003. This is why we need some kind of regulatory oversight, regulatory action as it befalls companies like Facebook and Google who traffic in user data. There needs to be a standard, a code of conduct, codified into regulation, into law, as to how these companies can operate and do business as they are supplanting major portions of the internet. You know, the backbone of our current internet is largely built on Google servers now. Not just for search, but actually for just hosting this stuff. And Facebook is getting insidiously involved in creating infrastructure for nations around the world so that they can be the primary face through which developing countries interact socially online. I do not believe that our current presidential administration's utilization of the Department of Justice is the way to do this. I believe oversight through commissions and through regulators like the FCC and the FTC are how we should go about policing this interaction between social media, internet infrastructure, and the end user, the end consumer. Facebook has been trying to have it both ways for too long. I feel Google, especially with YouTube, is guilty of the same kind of misrepresentation of their relationship to end users. Facebook will go in front of lawmakers and say, Mark Zuckerberg will sit in front of lawmakers and say that they are not a publishing platform, but they do have editorial oversight as to what can be posted on their platform. They make decisions very aggressively, very quickly, as to what images people can see, what content they can consume, and what stories that they will boost or chill depending on their algorithms. When negative stories about Facebook are chilled on Facebook, we have a significant conflict of interest regarding how people consume news. But again, like I mentioned before, our current set of laws, our current set of regulations are woefully inadequate to even address what our code of conduct should be. And we're having fake debates as to whether or not we should be employing net neutrality. We're having fake debates about competition in the marketplace as opposed to actually dealing with very real, very pressing issues that are right in front of us. And that's a very disappointing state of affairs. So we talk about it, but how do you communicate with people on a popular social media platform when that popular social media platform can then alter or chill or remove any criticisms of that platform? That's a problem. I feel that's a problem that we need to fix. And if Facebook is going to be neglectful, if Facebook is going to be disruptive in that kind of conversation, then I think an outside force needs to examine Facebook's relationship with consumers. So there we go. From Sherrill, Facebook has evolved into a media company and is now tightening the noose on bad content about them on their platform. Brett Carlton, replying to Kay Jones. So Kay Jones mentioned something about countries working with Facebook on internet infrastructure. Absolutely true in a number of areas where Facebook has... John Oliver did a piece on this too. Not to give him too much credit, because a lot of people have been talking about this for a while and why we have these major concerns. I actually decided not to talk about a couple stories. Amazon is going to be trying to create some kind of satellite internet, launching something into space. That to me seems like a real bad idea, right? I don't want that. I don't want the only competition we can have in broadband and ISPs being, Facebook and Amazon, who have a vested interest in consumerism and trafficking and user data, to be the only ways that we can fight current ISPs. And this is why the net neutrality debate is becoming so precious, is because we could be creating more of an infrastructure based on utility-like spread of broadband, but instead we're allowing a completely manipulated free market economic policy to get in the way of that. But I digress. So I need to take a quick break right here. I'm going to pull up my direct chat log, and I'm going to start putting everybody in timeouts who posts the word turtle. I do not run an amphibian or a aquarium style commentary, so the next quotes I see from people with the word turtle in them will be timed out. We cool? We cool. All right. So, moving right along to, let me get this out of the way. Last Facebook story, and then we can move on, is from TechCrunch. Yes, Facebook is using your two-factor authentication phone number to target you with ads. Oh, see, that's just real disappointing. I want two-factor to not be this bad. Okay, so Facebook has confirmed it does in fact use phone numbers that users provided for security purposes to also target them with ads. Specifically, a phone number handed over for two-factor authentication, a security technique that adds a second layer of authentication to help keep accounts secure. Facebook's confession follows a story Gizmodo ran yesterday related to research work carried out by academics at 2 universities. Who ran a study in which they say they were able to demonstrate the company uses pieces of personal information that individuals did not explicitly provide it to, nonetheless target them with ads. Again, this is real bad, not just because of the ads. Not just because of the ads. Ads suck. Right? I use ads as a pain point to try and encourage people to support my Patreon and eventually get to a podcast that is ad-free. I mean, it's carrot and the stick, right? So we can all acknowledge ads in our media are very frustrating and disrupt from media consumption, and that's why there's been this proliferation of ad blocker technology and different ways that you can you can get around people who are trying to monetize content. There's a big philosophical problem with the way that Facebook is utilizing your phone number, which is part of your two-factor authentication service, and then that information is somehow being made accessible to marketers. Without getting too into the techie side of this, two-factor authentication. You put in your login, your username, you put in your password, and then some other step sends a special PIN code to either your phone or to a text message that then finally gets you into the service. Okay? SMS two-factor authentication means I put in my username, I put in my password, and a text message with that PIN code arrives on my phone. That's actually proven to be fairly spoofable if someone wants to get your data. Your phone number isn't that secured, but it's at least better than nothing. Right? So again, we want to have those conversations. How valuable is your data? How hard is someone going to try and hack your mainframe? And what do you need to do to protect to the level of the sensitivity or the value of that information? Most people are fine with a login and password. I would advocate login, password, and some form of two-factor authentication is more than adequate for most people. But moving to some other kind of two-factor, like using an authenticator app, is a little bit more secure than using a text message because of how you can spoof and pull information from phone numbers. Facebook linking your login behavior to a phone number on two-factor and then utilizing that information to marketers makes your phone number less secure for two-factor for any service that you use. We've already seen Facebook leaks like a sieve when it comes to personal information, identifying that personal information and linking you and your behavior to that personal information. And their security inadequacy is a feature, not a bug. Their security lapse is essentially built directly into their monetization model. So if you're doing two-factor, if you want to use two-factor, I would highly recommend using some sort of two-factor app and not text messaging or SMS two-factor authentication. But even then, Facebook has demonstrated that they are not able or they are unwilling to properly safeguard your identifying information. This is so troubling and so concerning as we start to see other countries and their approach to more authoritarian control over information. How Europe is attacking memes is disappointing and is kind of a funny punchline to data security and intellectual property rights. But then how China is encouraging companies like Google to identify search information and link it to an end user so that China can still properly grade and rank citizens on how good they are, how good a citizen they are. These types of services and identification and links hurt an online global internet community. Facebook doing this because it helps pad their bottom line is a bad state of affairs on its own. It's annoying because of advertisements, and it has serious security implications in the long run for how your data and how your interactions are being tracked on social media. From Chaos5338, let's just hope that other companies start to do this ad thing with two-factor authentication. I don't know why we would hope that, but I don't know. From Deborah Dukes, Juan, do they do this if you don't use Facebook? I mean, it just kind of depends by what you mean don't use. Like, I have a Facebook account and I don't really use it. Like, I post on my personal page maybe once every couple months, and then everything on my SomeGadgetGuy Facebook page is basically just auto-barfed from other services. Like, if I post something on SomeGadgetGuy.com, it's just automatically dumped on there. If I post a photo on Instagram, because Instagram and Facebook are the same, I kind of don't care, so that photo just gets dumped onto the SomeGadgetGuy Facebook page. I'm not really using it. The behavior and the information that you would get from that is not very valuable, in my opinion, because I don't put any effort into Facebook. If you're using any kind of Facebook login, any type of Facebook tracking, there's a greater likelihood that personal information on you can be linked to your actual behavior. But even if you're not, chances are probably pretty good that you at some point have run across a website that has helped Facebook by installing cookies that Facebook can track to identify you too. It's just whether or not that information can really be linked back to you is some of the unknown in regards to how this information is stored and how this information is sold to marketers. From Sharil Abdul Rahman, which is why the departure of the two founders from, I think it's from Instagram recently. I don't know that WhatsApp, the founder of WhatsApp, left. But anyway, quite alarming. WhatsApp has been standalone so far, but are we seeing a tighter incorporation between the two services? So I think you're talking about the story where the founders of Instagram very publicly left Facebook. And while everyone's trying to play the happy face, everything's fine game, it's just a very dramatic departure from two individuals who have been very grounded, very chill, very even-handed in how they've handled their platform in the past. So it's a concerning turn when we look at Facebook's global strategy, the markets that they work in, and then how they're starting to handle their other properties. My Instagram usage has fallen off dramatically since they started manipulating the timeline. And even though they said they kind of replaced it, they kind of pulled it back to more of a chronological timeline, that was a lie. I'm still getting like Instagram posts from like 3 days ago, and it really destroys the interaction that I have with other people on that experience. So I'm very cold on Facebook's interaction with the properties that they own. All right. Get that out of the way there. Okay. 90 minutes, and I'm going to blow through these last couple stories. California, doing me proud. We've been talking about SB 822 for a little while, net neutrality, state of California. Governor Brown signs tough net neutrality law, sets up battle with the FCC and tech companies. Literally the same day, Trump administration sues California over net neutrality law. Again, President Trump utilizing the Department of Justice to try and block a state law where conservatives, and I mean this in the current flavor of the GOP, have given up any pretense of being for states' rights. They are now suing California over their net neutrality law. We were pretty confident this was going to happen. Doesn't mean we still can't be somewhat disappointed by this turn of affairs. The people of California spoke. The lawmakers of California spoke. We wanted to enact net neutrality regulation here in the state of California. We have major infrastructure problems, and having corporations start messing with, like Silicon Valley and other tech hotspots around the state, not good for us. And having some basic low-level protection of how ISPs can do business with the citizenry would be very helpful. The fact that the turnaround was hours between Governor Brown signing SB 822 and the Trump administration sicking the DOJ on California is hilarious. From Marvin C., states' rights is a scam. This is something where I don't know. I feel there's always supposed to be some sort of compromise and balance between how the federal government interacts with states' rights, but I think we've seen a number of instances where the federal government has refused to actually properly examine a scenario that would be in the interest of justice and the citizenry, and it's up to the states to correct that. And so that check and balance seems to be for the benefit of American citizens. It's just from the Trump administration's suing California over environmental standards and trying to use the EPA as a way to lower environmental protection standards, to using the FCC to try and gut consumer regulations and consumer protections, is just a ridiculous and terrible state of affairs. I just think it's hilarious and sad and pretty crazy. So this doesn't even really have much in the way of actual substance regards to what the policy should be. This is why I say we have these fake debates. A majority of the American population want some kind of internet protections. A majority of the population do not want companies like Comcast and Verizon to be in charge of how services on the internet can be consumed. Our lawmakers are pretending like there's some kind of debate as to whether or not we want some kind of protection. And the FCC under this administration is acting like there's a vocal part of the American citizenry, the American population, that just want completely abandoned free market economy to be open in a way that corporations can manipulate. The American population is all pretty much on the same page here. We want some kind of protections. Now, between my liberal-leaning friends and my conservative-leaning friends, we have some very stark differences on how that regulation should be enacted, how it should be handled, who should be in charge of it. But we all agree something needs to be protecting, something needs to be in place to defend consumers against unfair business practices. I don't believe it should be the purview of the FTC. I believe it should be the purview of the FCC. And I believe it should be very light touch. I think it should be in keeping with the Telecommunications Act and the way that the FCC was able to work against unfair business practices in the telephony space. And I think that if major corporations, ISPs, and their lobbyist groups are going to claim that internet access should be funded like a utility. Remember, I think this was about 3 weeks ago. The major lobbyists for large ISPs and for small ISPs all agreed that internet communications should be funded with taxpayer funds, taxpayer dollars, like utilities, like water and power. But they are also viscerally fighting in court that they should have no regulatory oversight. I need that to sink in, and I need you to share that with your other tech-inclined and less tech-savvy family and friends. ISPs are claiming that though they are crazy profitable, they cannot improve connections to rural communities, and they cannot improve speeds in urban communities because they are not receiving enough taxpayer dollars. They will not improve infrastructure and bandwidth until they get more taxpayer money. But they don't feel they should have any regulation. So they want American citizens to subsidize their investments so that they can receive all of the profits from their business practices free of any kind of oversight. That is the current state of affairs. I believe that is wrong. The people of California believe that is wrong. And we are now enacting some kind of protections to make sure that your video streams don't get throttled just because Spectrum says so, that we can't have unfair data caps, predatory data caps, which don't affect connection, but further increase the likelihood that consumers will have to pay more for the same connection that they've always enjoyed. Zero rating, throttling, interconnection fees, all of these ways that you can extract wealth from competing services while also promoting your own. So if Comcast has a service that they want you to use, they can affect other services so that it's more painful to use them or it's more expensive to use them. That's a problem, and I disagree with that. In fact, most conservatives I know also disagree with that. And what we need to have is a sit-down, grown-up conversation where I don't get everything I want and conservatives don't get everything they want. We both leave the table pissed off, but reality is somewhere in between my liberal whining and their conservative griping, right? That's where we should eventually arrive, but we can't do that when our lawmakers, and especially this administration in Washington right now, are pretending like there's not even a consensus on this, are pretending like the debate is some sort of Ayn Randian 13-year-old wet dream of standing up for the individual. Like that's not what we're doing here. Oh, Keith Richardson, not really impressed with 5G micromillimeter technology. Oh, and the ATSC 3.0. That's a whole other tangent. I mean, like, that's a whole other, but I digress, all on its own. From Deborah Dukes, it's very frustrating. The problem I have is this is where the commentary on my channel has gotten very aggressive, and where the number of threats of harm and death threats to my channel have also started to climb. Is the second I put net neutrality in the keywords, I'm not drawing the most rational opponents to this conversation. It's why those of you who are actually in the live chat not talking about turtles are so valuable to this podcast. Or if I just had a co-host, I would just be me in an echo chamber talking about how great we are. It's where I've seen people disagree with me. But when we really boil this down to brass tacks, we disagree on far less than we really think we do. As long as we can look at the situation and acknowledge that there's a problem, that is so much better than what our lawmakers are currently guilty of. guilty of pretending that there's a debate as to whether or not there is a problem is not good governance. That is not good leadership. Okay. One last story here. Again, California doing me proud. We can wrap this this news podcast up. This is by way of CNET, and CNET is asking me. Oh wait, I just moved all my windows around. 1 second. Let me recover. This is from CNET. California governor signs country's first Internet of Things security law. California Governor Jerry Brown has signed into law a broad cybersecurity bill governing Internet of Things devices, making the state the first in the nation to adopt such legislation. Brown signed the bill SB 327, a bill I was not aware of. I did not know that this was on the docket, so shame on me. This law mandates that any maker of an internet-connected or, quote, smart device ensure the gadget has reasonable security features that protect the device and any information contained therein from unauthorized access, destruction, use, modification, or disclosure. So this is very weak legislation. These are very, plant-eater teeth. These are not sharp claws. There are plenty of loopholes, and there are plenty of ways that a company can get around this. The wording on it, I could actually, what I should try and do, I think I can actually, when this video is done processing, I'll link to the actual language of the bill. Anyone who reads through this, who has any kind of tech savviness, will be able to see that there are some vague wordings that manufacturers could use to circumvent some of these protections. The thing that's notable about this, and the reason why I'm excited that it's the first of its kind, is improving the relationship between manufacturer and IoT means we have to create trust. We cannot have trust if you're working security through obfuscation or security through hiding your problems. Like when there's a major problem in Mac OS, in OS 10, Apple doesn't rush to disclose, and Apple doesn't communicate with affected end users. They try and pretend like nothing's wrong until they have a fix. That's not a good way to go about securing and protecting your platform. Like Mac Defender, I think that went for 2 months before Apple had an appropriate response, and that whole time we had radio silence. Now, I want you to imagine a security threat on Windows as crippling as something like Mac Defender, where Microsoft avoided the conversation of their platform for 2 months before coming out with some kind of fix for their users. If you buy a cheap webcam, if you have a thermostat, if you have a garage door opener or a sprinkler system, anything Wi-Fi connected is essentially a computer which can serve as a point of entry for someone, a bad actor, to get into that space. Not just for your personal information, but for creating zombie armies. Oh my God, I'm gonna sound so much like Alex Jones here, but I assure you, I promise you that this is not fake news. But those tiny little computers, if they're not properly protected, encrypted, password locked on your network, can be used to create denial of service attacks, to disrupt internet consumer traffic. Not only are they a point of entry for someone to get into your own stuff, but they can also be used to harm other internet services and other internet resources. So this as legislation, actually codified as a law, is an insufficient but necessary first step into illuminating that relationship for consumers. What we all want to arrive at is like a Star Trek computer. I can just talk into the air, magical things happen. I always get the right answer for my searches or for the information that I'm looking for. I don't have to be tethered to individual little screens or glowing rectangles. These things are what we want. But the Star Trek computer is this this fantasy, this communist fantasy future where everything's super happy and groovy and no one has any bad ulterior motives for stealing your data or utilizing your personal information. It's just this utopian ideal of what computers and technology could resemble. That's not the world we live in. So until we get there, we have to hold these companies to higher standards of safeguarding our data, protecting our information, then also being good internet citizens so that the things we buy can't be used to attack other individuals. So that's a necessary part of this conversation, and we need to be very public. We need to be very, very vocal about who's doing that well. Like, I want to vote with my dollars. If Belkin smart plugs are easier and better to secure than like a no-name Chinese knockoff, the couple dollars you might save by going with the cheaper product should be balanced against how vulnerable did they just make your network? How vulnerable did they just make your personal information? And are they being utilized in some kind of disastrous internet attack? That's more, in my opinion now, with IoT, that's becoming more important than just what are the capabilities of the gadget. Like, no one's really impressed by a Nest thermostat anymore. No one really cares if you've got smart cameras in your home. We're getting over that. Like, we freaked out about Microsoft and the Kinect, but now everyone's got like speakers that they talk to that are always listening for keywords and triggers. Now, on top of that, do we have some kind of framework? And just like with every other story that we've talked about here, do we have a legal framework to properly illustrate what this landscape should look like? Do we have tech-savvy voices in our community who are pointing to these situations and saying, this is how we want to do business, and this is how our courts should respond when someone runs afoul of how we want to do business? Same thing, getting back to right to repair. That's a pretty big deal in how we own our devices as opposed to whether or not we're leasing it or we bought it outright. We should be able to fix things that we own. Do we really own that thing if I can't take out a screwdriver set, pop it open, and swap out a battery without the phone freaking out because of proprietary security features which are just meant to pad a manufacturer's bottom line? That's what I mean, is we need some process to say, this is not okay, or this is starting to become not okay, and it's a situation that we need to study or that we need to examine. Same thing, cybersecurity, same thing, net neutrality, same thing, healthcare. Uncertainty is bad, right? If we're learning along the way and we're evolving, and no one should ever look at one piece of legislation and say, oh, now we nailed it, it's done. We're gonna have to look at this California IoT law and see what it broke, right? Every new law breaks something, and we'll have to go back and fix that too. But we need some starting point, some beginning conversation to say, we now expect, if you wanna do business, this is the minimum. This is how we want business to be conducted, and we can have a conversation from there. That's the game. So California, where I've had a lot of problems with California infrastructure, where I've had a lot of problems with California politics, this last week, California was doing me proud. I'm very proud of what we managed to get done in light of the current national discussion on some of these topics. So kudos there. All right, folks, got about 15 minutes before I got to pull the plug on this. I got to sit up and I got to drink some more water, so my voice is already starting to get a little soft. What do you guys want to talk about now that I think I've blocked most of the folks who were, I don't know what was going on with the turtles thing. Can someone tell me, was there like an inciting incident about turtles that I somehow missed? Because it's pretty rare that I have to go out with ban hammers, but I did have to hide, like properly hide, not just put in timeouts. I did have to hide 2 people, so who knows. Or is there something else we want to talk about, like different phones that are going to be coming out? Do we care about the LG V40? Lots of leaks there. Huawei's and Mates. What are we looking at? From Scott Ahrens. Look at the states that don't even have recycle cans. Oh, look at the states that don't even recycle cans. Yeah, I don't get it when we have some issues there. Akshay is asking to do some Q&A. I'm just not seeing any questions, guys. We gotta have questions. Do a Q&A. From Sharil Abdul Rahman, your opinion between stock experience and the Pixel experience. Oh yeah, the notion that the Google Pixel is somehow a stock device definitely doesn't gel with what Android as an open source project resembles. I think the Pixel launcher is Google's first foray into priming us for what Fuchsia will be like. They have to make some major changes to their operating system, their platform, how they work with other manufacturers, that Google is branded above Samsung when it comes to consumer relationships. And I think what we're looking at there are the first steps towards controlling the experience. This is the Google experience, and this is what we're going to be in store for, I think, when they pull off that Band-Aid to move us from Android to Fuchsia. From Brett Carlton, this guy made the reference to the joke from YouTube years ago, but took it too far. I guess it's pretty funny. Turtles? I like turtles. So Aditya Anil, what's your plan of attack for the upcoming events? I'm definitely going to try and sit in on the live stream for LG. There's a Razer event out here on the West Coast. I'm going to try to go, but it's the day before a Newegg shoot, and my Newegg call times are stupid early in the morning, so I might not be able to do much. I'm going to try. LG is obviously my most anticipated phone of the year with the V40. I'm very anxious to see what LG does with that device. And then after that, the Mate is another one of my top phones. The iPhone I'm wedging in now for continued coverage and comparisons. I haven't been super impressed with what Apple offers at $1,000, but it's a part of the conversation. And then I don't know. That might be all I can get to through the end of the year. We'll have to see. I don't want to spread too thin so that individual videos suffer. Like, for example, as soon as I'm done with this, I have to go shoot more for my iPhone camera review on top of getting a couple other videos done also. So we'll have to see. I can't owe as much time to leaks, to rumors, and to events. They just take up way too much time for way too little benefit to talk about a phone that we've already been talking about that won't really be a substantive conversation until the phone's in my hand. So I do that with an iPhone just because I know I'm going to get the social media traffic. But it's just an increasing time sink when I'm a solo producer. If I had a team and I could, contract one person to go and do this or go to this event, go talk to these people, that would be awesome. But it's all just me. So we'll see how that goes. From Maris M, how safe are services like OnePass, especially since their issue a few years ago? That's a very good question, Maris. I am probably not the best qualified to talk about security situations, especially like getting into white hat or black hat types of discussions. But like I've said with other things in this podcast, you need to be the first line of defense on safeguarding your information. And the first thing that I think is valuable in that is running some kind of mini audit. How valuable do you consider your information to be? How likely do you feel people will try to access that information beyond just bad actors who get scores of logins and passwords through security breaches? And how valuable is that protection balanced against any perceived inconvenience in getting to your information? So when I bring up government passwords, when I see my friends who still work in government jobs pull out a phone and type in a robust, like 12-digit alphanumeric with special characters password to get into their device, that's not something I want to do just when I'm looking at my Instagram. But if I were still working at in my casting job and I were still having to safeguard NDA material, if actors' sensitive information, payment information, when I processed jobs through the union so that actors could get paid, that's a much bigger security threat than just like my own personal. So I'm kind of okay with the current state of two-factor authentication and my own password strategy. I don't use a password app. I'm just fine with my own password strategy and cycling through my own memorized passwords, which is kind of a pain in the ass. I should probably look at something else. But I don't feel like I've risen to that level of threat yet where I need to do something crazy more robust than that. From Patrick King, have you ever had a home button not work if the SIM card was removed on an Android device? I can't say that I have. From Gansy Tech Nerd, Evan Blast's leaks of the LG V40 camera was somewhat interesting. What do you think? I'm always disappointed by Evan Blast leaks because it takes some of the fun out of the discovery of what's going to be on that gadget when it finally arrives. This is kind of the strategy we thought LG was going to go with, right? You're going to go with 3 cameras on the back and 2 cameras on the front. It's basically just an ultra mashup of every zoom and focal length trick that we've seen on previous LGs and on every other phone. So the front-facing cameras, there's going to be a standard field of view and an ultra wide. That's awesome. I loved when we had the 2 camera sensors on previous LG V phones. I thought that was way better than the single camera software processing trick, the cropping trick that they had when they went to a single front-facing camera but still had an ultra-wide mode. So that's cool. On board. I think having a wider selfie camera is a huge benefit. I do not like on my iPhone that everything I do needs to be at full arm's length to take photos with a decent background and with me in a head and shoulders shot. Like, my arms just aren't long enough. I've gotten so used to other wider cameras. Oh, and I've definitely gotten used to, do I have it out here? I had my, oh yeah, here it is. Like on my V30, where I just fire up the ultra wide camera from the back and it kind of doesn't even matter what my framing is. Right about here is perfect. Gets a great sense of the background and it's much, much wider than like an iPhone selfie camera. So I don't understand how people use this unless all they want is like from the bottom of the neck to giving themselves a haircut, duck face photos. If that's all you do, the iPhone selfie camera is baller. But if you want like a good vacation shot, it's not good. I don't get it. Sorry, I digress. The rear cameras look exactly like what I figured LG would do. Keep the ultra wide. It's one of the most valuable additions to smartphone photography that I've ever used. And if we're gonna play with focal length as the main driver, you go with a zoom as the third sensor. What I'm really anxious to see is, will LG finally enlarge the main sensor? From the V10 to the V30, LG has been making the argument that they can get away with using a smaller sensor and a better glass lens for light transmission. They're not wrong, but V phones do struggle in ultra low light situations. And if you've ever seen the stills photography from like a Huawei, especially the P20 Pro, bigger sensor helps. Samsung, a bigger sensor helps. The new iPhone, some nice improvements to some of the low light processing because a bigger sensor helps. So that's really what I'm looking for most, is does the main camera sensor use a larger sensor with this supposed increase in aperture size? That could be really exciting for an LG getting back to a bigger sensor. From MBK98, thoughts on Sony's future smartphones? I don't know. Sony switched PR companies after the XZ1. So I went hands-on pretty deep with the XZ1 and the XZ1C. And the new Sony PR team will reply to my emails, but then they like to play that game of like, well, what kind of content are you going to produce? And like, well, I'm going to do a review on my YouTube channel. Will this also be going to, like Fox LA and your TV channel? Like, well, I'm trying to work on content for that too, but you don't do a phone review on network TV. Then silence. It was legit one-to-one. What can you do for us? Can you promote our product on TV? No, you don't get one. So I haven't handled the new premiums or ultras or whatever they're called. I haven't had an XZ2, and I'm probably not going to get an XZ3, especially now having said all that out loud. So I am going to talk to a retailer, someone who does international phone sales and shipments, to see if I can go hands-on, but I'm not going to break my neck. If that's the kind of relationship that Sony's going to have with reviewers, then if I can get around to reviewing their phones, I will. If I can't, I'm fine sidelining them. That's just where we're at. The Nitpicker, why so many phones so late into the year, so close to the next gen? Dude, I wish I knew. so many of these companies believe that there's this value in having a two-phone strategy or like an end-of-the-year release. It's way too close to Christmas. I think it's disastrous launching after iPhone. I just think iPhone sucks so much air out of the room, so much money out of the discussion. I mean, you weren't really going to get iOS users to switch to your Android device, and especially not after the iPhone's already made that that transition. So here, let me get ABS and get that out of the way there. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's a smart play like it used to be. Back when Samsung was really splitting the year up with Galaxy S and Galaxy Note, and that felt fresh and that felt novel. That was a much bigger deal to be in the end of the year. Now, I don't think it helps companies out like they used to. Get this out of the way here. Oh, and let me hide a few more people. Boom. Okay. And some other questions. Sorry, I'm scrolling up through the live chat right now. Goran Petrovic, V40 will be way more expensive. I'm really hoping it won't be the startling leap in price that Apple has convinced the market that it can charge, but I would be surprised if this wasn't a $900 phone. I'm really hoping that they don't just go lockstep into Samsung charged $1,000 for the Note, so we can charge $1,000 for the V40. But again, for a lot of their price arguments, when they price against Samsung, they usually look at how can we make our phone $80 cheaper, and that's tricky. So again, I'm very confident that we'll see a price somewhere around $899, if not higher. From Moomin74, I wish LG didn't include the notch. I completely agree with you there. I think it's such an eyesore. I don't like using it. I mean, for example, when I just recently picked up an LG phone to show off how I use wide angle, what was nearer in reach was my V30. Now, if I reach a little bit further out, I do have the G7 also pretty close too. There are a couple things about the V30 I still like better than the G7, which is why I also reach for it. But one of those things is I don't like the notch. I don't like it. I still talk about the G7 being the solution that it is because it's still the only one I've encountered which supports audio as well. So I care about that. If you want good audio, you need to shop an LG. But damn, I wish we could just get back to the V30 and the G6. I mean, even the G6, I like the form factor on that better. So it's just kind of a bummer. Let me see if we can wrap this up here. If there's any other really great burning questions. Spike626721. Yeah, I used the V30 on a concert, and how sadly a pixel storm on my pictures and videos. Got it sadly recommended of YouTubers for concerts, 480 euro for nothing. So the thing about a V30, depending on what you're trying to shoot, ultra low light, you need to expose darker than you think you need to. And then you're treated to some of the best mics on a phone. The reason why we say the V30 is such a beast at concert recording isn't necessarily the visuals, but you have epic control over locking the shutter to prevent the phone from getting too blown out. If you just shoot auto, the phone is going to try and make the video look brighter than it needs to, and that's going to really exacerbate some of the issues that we already know we've got with LG and low light. You need to go a little darker, but on top of that, you've got phenomenal audio. So you record that concert footage from a V series phone, because the video is going to look fine once you dial in the right settings, but it's going to sound so much better than most of the competition out there. And depending on what it is that you listen to, you've got those tools built in to do something like a low cut filter to take out some of the rumble if you're too close to the subs, or you can set a limiter so that the phone won't clip and distort as easily when things get loud. It's just great. And then on top of that, you can also plug in headphones, this sounds so silly, and I know just general concert goers probably wouldn't want to do this, but if you're trying to capture good footage, you can protect your ears, use the phone microphones to reference, and you get real-time referencing while you're listening to the audio being captured by the phone. And again, no other phone does that. It's amazing. So this is why I want LG to go with the larger camera sensors, because it's going to make some of that low light capture a little bit easier. It's not bad, but it's just not as nice as a phone with a larger camera sensor. But if I can combine that slightly larger camera sensor with the amazing audio processing capabilities, that's peanut butter jelly time. That's amazing. And I think that's about it. Let me get this out of the way here. And so I'm just gonna go through and tag a few more people who are being annoying, and then we'll wrap this all up. Okay, scroll to the end. And wrap that up. Okay, folks, this was a lovely conversation as always. I think it's time to properly end this podcast. My voice probably can't handle much more. So thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for participating. I'm going to have links to all of these stories on my website, SomeGadgetGuy.com, and below the YouTube version of this live stream when it goes live. Of course, you can always catch the wrap-up audio on the SGGQA podcast feed. That podcast feed is now serving double duty. I'm always sensitive to changing what you sign up for when you sign up for something. So if you subscribed to the SGGQA podcast feed, that's Some Gadget Guy question and answer. So I feel it's appropriate to have podcasts where the Q&A is with my audience and podcasts where the Q&A is with interviews, is where I'm interviewing guests. I would like feedback from the community over the next week. You can find me on social media. You can find me on YouTube. You can hit my email. How that feels to you when we move back and forth in a podcast feed between this style of long-form, rambling, Juan on a soapbox, shaking his fist at the government kinds of conversations, and then breaking into other kinds of interviews with people that I think are interesting. That being said, I really hope you'll start checking out some of the creator chat series on the SGGQA podcast. They will never be YouTube videos. I just feel a long-form discussion feels more appropriate. I just get to sit down, focus on having that conversation with my guest. I don't have to run to a live chat or police a community who are all giving me weird animal jokes and turtle puns and stuff. But then also, I don't want to be distracted in having to set up some kind of live feed when I'm having a conversation with a friend. So that's why I've split the tone of those two, but I'm still including them on the same podcast feed. To date, I've had 3 amazing conversations with YouTube creators. Started the series off with TK Bay, talking about how he got his start at XDA developers and how he manages now 2 different audiences between his own personal channel and XDA. I had a phenomenal conversation with Demir Frank, the Nitpicker, someone you should also subscribe to both of their YouTube channels, talking about some of those expectations between an international audience and a more German, a more focused European audience. And then last week, I had that sit-down conversation with the guys at Tech Syndicate, talking about how, as their channel evolved, the pushback they got from their community, the fallout they had from their community. This week on Creator Chat, this Friday, I am so stoked I could puke. One of my oldest friends here in California is a gentleman by the name of Yuri Lowenthal. Yuri Lowenthal is one of the most accomplished and prolific voice actors I have ever had the fortune of hearing in animation and video games, let alone having had the experiences of working with him in a professional endeavor back when I was doing voice casting and voiceover direction. He is an amazing individual and a rarity in Southern California that when he says he's going to do something, he's almost done doing it. He is the voice of Spider-Man in the PlayStation 4 video game, and he is the star of a new web show on the Nerdist called Orbital Redux, which is one of the most ambitious streaming events I think I've ever seen. It's a weekly science fiction show which is performed live with audience interactions that dictate the future course of the plot. There is a list of maybe 6 people in my brain who I've worked with in Hollywood. Some of them directors of major, feature films that are not on this list, who I could imagine could accomplish something as incredible as what they're doing on Orbital Redux. The second episode of that show is going to be out this Thursday. An amazing experiment in high production quality science fiction storytelling, staged like a play, because it's performed live with audience interactions right before the show goes live. Again, it's not quite choose your own adventure, but it's pretty close. So he is joining Creator Chat this Friday to talk about his experiences in making content. He is an accomplished writer. He is an accomplished producer. He doesn't like to step on directors' toes, but he has directed. And he is in all forms of media. His IMDb page is longer than my torso, and all of it is a credit to every genre of content and media that he's ever worked in. I cannot gild this lily enough. I cannot gush over this individual enough, because he is genuinely one of my closest friends in Hollywood. And I'm just so happy to be able to share some of this in a long-form conversation this Friday. So be on the lookout for the next episode of Creator Chat this Friday. And in addition to that, my ongoing conversation about iPhone-y stuff and smartphone industry stuff. I have some gaming stuff that I'm working on. It probably won't be ready for next week. And then I am silly excited to be working with the guys at Me Audio. They sent me over some in-ear monitors. So these are $50 in-ear monitors, single driver, but they sound phenomenal if you really like the mids. But I teased on my social media going down to their offices in a city of industry, and they shoved something into my ear to scan my ear. And hopefully next week, we can talk about some ultra low cost, molded, custom fit ear pads to go onto their in-ear monitors, where this used to be something like $1,000 back when I started in the recording industry to get molds done and have custom IEMs done, that now we can do this whole thing for like $200. That is ridiculously exciting to me in a land where Google's trying to tell me that $160 will get me Bluetooth earbuds that wreck my hearing. This is a big deal. So, audio stuff coming, smartphone stuff coming, in-depth reviews coming, and if you want to be on the pulse, definitely check out SomeGadgetGuy.com. But if you would like to support production on this channel, Patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy is going to be probably the best resource towards keeping up to date while also supporting production on this channel and getting access to all of the patron exclusive reviews, like my camera deep dives, my audio reviews, and all of that fun stuff. So I can't wait. This is going to be an amazing roller coaster ride these next couple weeks in producing content. I don't even know if I can really finish all of this. Please hang on, because I am white knuckling this whole ride too, and it's going to be real exciting wherever I end up. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for participating. Anyone talking turtles can shut the hell up. And you know where you can find me next week on the Monday Morning Tech Chat Show. Catch me around the rest of the internet at SomeGadgetGuy on the Twitters, the Instagrams, and the Facebooks. And I will catch you on next week's live stream. But before then, this Friday, Creator Chat, be there or be square. Kids still say that, right?